Thank you all. Thank you all for coming out this morning. Let me thank Bruce Penny for his welcome and Senator Robert Wirch for his very kind words. So you guys ready for a political revolution? So let me start off by explaining what a political revolution means to me. What it means is an understanding that we live in a country with an extraordinary history and so much that we should all be proud of. But we are at a pivotal moment in history where, for a variety of reasons, we have a small number of people, extraordinarily wealthy people, extraordinarily powerful people, who now, to a significant degree, control our economics and control our political life. And what that means is that as a result of this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, we now have a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. And what that is about is that today, billionaires like the Koch brothers and others can spend unlimited amounts of money to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. Now, I am the former chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I have talked to veterans going all the way back from World War II. And it saddens me very much to see that those men and women who put their lives on the line to defend democracy are now looking at a situation where billionaires are able to buy elections. That is not democracy, that is oligarchy, and we have got to stop that. Democracy is not a complicated concept. It really is not. What it means is one person, one vote. You got to vote, and you got to vote, and you got to vote. You want to vote for me, you want to vote against me. That's your privilege. But what democracy is not about is a handful of billionaires in this election cycle spending close to $900 million on elections. All right? And that is why together we are going to overturn Citizens United and move toward public funding of elections. But that is not the only attack on democracy that is taking place. A corrupt campaign finance system is a huge issue that we have got to deal with, but there's another issue going on. And that is all over this country, cowardly Republican governors, including the governor here in Wisconsin, are trying to suppress the vote and make it harder for people to participate. Now, I have friends who are conservatives. We have different points of view. They're honest. They have their view. I have my view. But what politics should not be about is governors using their power to make it harder for people to vote just because those people might vote against those governors or their political party. And we're seeing that here in Wisconsin. We're seeing that all over the country. A recent Supreme Court decision which made major changes in the Voting Rights Act law has allowed them to do that. And let me just tell you very honestly, I believe very strongly in democracy. I really believe it's an extraordinary system, allows real debate on issues, empowers all of the people with all of what that means. And I have run in my own state of Vermont for office a whole lot of times. And sometimes I've lost and sometimes I've won. Most of the times, fortunately, I've won. But it has never occurred to me, not for 1 second, to say, okay, I know that that part of the state may not be voting for me. How do we make it more difficult for those people to vote? That has never occurred to me. If I can't win on my ideas, I don't want to win. So when you have governors who are making it very deliberately in very deliberate ways, making it harder for young people or old people or poor people to participate in the political process, I say to those cowardly governors, if you can't stand up and win in a free and open and fair election, get out of politics, get another job. Now, next Tuesday, there is going to be a very, very important primary election here in Wisconsin. And why don't you show the governor here that his efforts to suppress the vote have not worked? Come out in large numbers. And I'm a little prejudiced about this. We have won 6 out of the 7 last caucuses being held. And we seem to always do well when the voter turnout is high. We don't do so well when the voter turnout is low. So I myself am prejudiced. I like to see a large voter turnout. But this campaign is not only taking on a corrupt campaign finance system and governors who are trying to suppress the vote. It is also dealing with a rigged economy. And by that I mean we have an economy today in America which allows for more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, and it is worse here today than at any time since 1928. And when I speak to young people, what I want to point out to you, and I say this without any joy in my heart, that if we don't get this economy turned around, you will have the dubious distinction of being the first generation in modern American history to have a lower standard of living than your parents. Now, the American dream, as all of you know, and it was certainly the case in my family never had a whole lot of money. My father came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. He never made any money. But his dream and my mom's dream was to work hard and to see their kids do better, and that was the case. But unless we turn this economy around, you will have a lower standard of living than your parents. You will earn less than your parents. The jobs that you do will pay you less. Your housing situation will be worse. So we have got to turn that economy around, because I am determined not to see the American dream end. But the issue that we're dealing with today is not just a problem for young people. It is a problem for every worker in America. Now, here is the good news. The good news today is that our economy is much, much better than it was 7.5 years ago when George W. Bush left office. Now, my Republican friends suffer from a very serious illness, and we should be sympathetic to them. It's called amnesia. And they like to blame every problem that exists today on Barack Obama, but they just seem to forget that 7.5 years ago when Bush left office, we were hemorrhaging 800,000 jobs a month, that our deficit was $1.4 trillion, and that the world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. Other than that, we were in pretty good shape. So we have come a long way in 7.5 years. There's no debate about that. But there is also no debate that for the last 30 or 40 years, the middle class of this country has been disappearing, and more of our wealth and income is going to the top 1%. In America today, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Guys got that? Today in America, the 20 wealthiest people, not a lot of people, own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. Today in America, and I want to give you an example of what a rigged economy is about, and I can give you a million examples, but here's an interesting one. Who owns Walmart? Anyone know? Walton family. Walton family is the wealthiest family in America, and Walmart is the largest private sector employer. It's a big deal. And yet, many of the employees at Walmart, because their wages are so low, are forced to go on Medicaid, food stamps, and subsidized housing. Who pays for the food stamps, Medicaid, and subsidized housing? Middle class of this country and higher taxes. What a rigged economy is about is when working people who are struggling to keep their heads above water are subsidizing the company owned by the wealthiest family in America. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. Working families should not have to subsidize the wealthiest family in America. But when we talk about the issues facing this country, and by the way, talking about these issues is not so easy. It's not something the media is particularly inclined to want to talk about for a variety of reasons. And it's not a pleasant discussion to have. But we cannot go forward as a nation if we do not address the most important issues. It's true in our personal lives, and it's true in our political lives. And a lot of people would prefer us not to do that. But what this campaign is saying is that we are smart enough, we are tough enough to address the real issues and in fact resolve them. So, you got a corrupt campaign finance system, which means that the wealthy are able to buy elections. You got a rigged economy with massive levels of income and wealth inequality. In terms of income, what's going on in America today? What's going on is that we have, in my state of Vermont, in your state of Wisconsin, we have people who are working longer hours for lower wages. You know, for the young people, you won't believe me, but check it out, it's true. There was once a time, not so many years ago, 40, 50 years ago, where one person, in those days usually a man, could work 40 hours a week and earn enough money to take care of the entire family. Older people, am I right? All right, tell that to the young people, they don't believe it. So the question that we have got to ask ourselves is, with all of the technology out there, right? You're all producing more, why do we need now two breadwinners, often working crazy hours, and ending up with less disposable income than one breadwinner had 40 or 50 years ago? Think about those issues. So what you've got now is mom out working long hours, you got dad out working, and you got the kids out working. What does that mean? It means that marriages get stressed out. It means that parents don't have the kind of time they need to spend with their children, and their children suffer as a result of that. But despite the fact, and here's another fact, in America today, we work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. Japanese are very hard workers. We work longer hours than the Japanese. And after all of that work and effort, turns out that 58% of all new income generated goes to the top 1%. So there you are, an explosion of technology, we produce more, a global economy, the world is closer, and ordinary people are struggling and working longer hours for lower wages, and they are scared to death about what happens to their kids, the kind of jobs their kids will have, the housing that their kids will have. That is called a rigged economy. Are you guys ready for a radical idea? All right. Together, we are going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. Now, when we talk about the issues facing our country, it is a corrupt campaign finance system, And the danger there is that the wealthy keep electing people who will continue to represent their interests. The second issue, further issue that we have to deal with now is not only a corrupt campaign finance system, it is not only a corrupt economy, but it is also it is also a broken criminal. Okay, it is also a broken criminal justice system. Will, you do something? Okay, the third issue, just ignore that for a minute. The third issue that we have to deal with is a broken criminal justice system. And what that means when we talk about a broken criminal justice system, okay. Thank you. Third issue. Third issue is we have got to address, which is a very, very serious crisis, is why is it that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we have more people in jail than any other country? That's right. We have 2.2 million people in jail. We spend $80 billion a year locking them up. China has a population 4 times our size. We have more people in jail than China. Why is that? And there are a lot of reasons for it, but let me start off with one reason. Right now, and you don't see this very often on the media, but right now, youth unemployment is off the charts. If kids who are white, who graduated high school between the age of 17 and 20 right now, their real unemployment is 33%. If they are Latino, 36%. If they are African American, 51%. I want you to think about that. Think about being a young person, graduating high school. You can't get a job. What are you going to do? You're hanging out on street corners, and there is a tendency to get into trouble. So here is radical idea number 2. For those young people, we are going to invest in education and jobs, not jails or incarceration. Now, when we talk about criminal justice, what are we talking about? We are talking about police department reform. We are talking about ending a situation where we continue to see on television police officers kill unarmed people, often minorities. Now, I have been a mayor for 8 years, and I have worked with police officers throughout my life. And the vast majority, overwhelming majority of police officers are honest, they are hardworking, and they have a very, very difficult job. It is not easy being a police officer. And in fact, I would hope that people in this room will give thought to going into law enforcement, because that's an important area of our society. But at the end of the day, if a police officer, like any other public official, breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. When we think about police departments, we have got to be moving toward demilitarizing police departments. We have got to be making police departments look like the diversity of the communities they serve. And we have got to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Turns out that over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have police records, criminal records, as a result of possession of marijuana. Today, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug alongside of heroin. Now, people can argue the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but very few people think that marijuana is the equivalent of a killer drug like heroin. And that is why I have introduced legislation to take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. And when we talk about drugs, what I can tell you, that in my state of Vermont, neighboring New Hampshire, and all over this country, we have a growing epidemic of opiate and heroin addiction. This is a major crisis. We are losing people every single day who are overdosing on heroin and other drugs. To combat that epidemic, it seems to me, we should look at drug abuse, substance abuse, as a health issue, not a criminal issue. This campaign is doing well because we're doing something pretty unusual. We actually talk to people rather than just wealthy campaign contributors. That's an unusual thing in American politics. And we talk to working people. And you know what they tell me? They tell me they can't make it on $8 or $9 an hour because those wages are just too low. And what they also tell me is that we have got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. This campaign is talking to senior citizens, and they are telling me they can't make it on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. Is that right, seniors? Nobody can make it on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. A great nation is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has, but by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. And we cannot turn our backs on disabled veterans or senior citizens. Now, turns out that my Republican colleagues want to cut Social Security. Well, I've got some bad news for them. We're not going to cut Social Security. We are going to raise and expand Social Security benefits. This campaign is talking to women. And women are telling me they are tired of working for 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. And I know that every man here will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. This campaign is talking to young people. And what young people are asking is, why does it happen that when they do exactly what their parents want and their teachers want, and the whole society wants, and go out and get the best education they can, why are they ending up when they leave school in $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 with student debt. Anybody here going to have student debt or has student debt? Okay. In fact, there are millions of people who have student debt. And again, what this campaign is trying to do is ask people to think outside of the box, outside of the status quo. So what does that mean? Is education a good thing? Obviously it is. Are we living in a competitive global economy where we need the best educated workforce possible? Obviously we do. If that's the case, why are we punishing young people for doing what they're supposed to be doing? I sense some support for that idea here. All right, but here is the reality. First of all, I have talked to people all over this country. I talked in Burlington, Vermont, my home city, to a woman who wanted to be a doctor, and she did it. She struggled, she went through medical school, she graduated with $300,000 in debt. This is at a time when we desperately need more doctors. Talked to a woman in Iowa, graduated dental school. We have a major crisis in terms of dental care. We need more dentists. Graduated $400,000 in debt. Talked to a kid in Iowa, dropped out of college after 2 years, $60,000 in debt. Talk to a guy, I don't want to scare you young people. Maybe I shouldn't say that. This guy is 55 years of age. He has been paying off his student debt for 25 years. He is more in debt today than he was when he took it out, okay? So we got a pretty crazy situation. We are punishing people who need to be rewarded, not punished. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do two things, all right? Number one, for those of you who have student debt, we're gonna allow you to refinance that debt at the lowest possible interest rates you can find. And that will substantially reduce student debt. And second of all, we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Now, here is the main point, and again, this is called thinking outside of the box, not accepting the status quo. If we were here 50 years ago, and we were talking about education, the truth is that 50 years ago, if you had a high school degree, you were in pretty good shape economically. Likelihood is you can go out and get a pretty good middle-class job. But everybody here knows the world has changed, the economy has changed, technology has changed. That's the way it is. You need more education than somebody did 50 years ago if you are going to make it into the middle class. So it seems to me we have got to be rethinking the concept of public education. It shouldn't just be first grade through 12th grade. It should include free tuition at public colleges and universities. And it should include other things. It should include an expansion of Pell Grants and work-study programs. The bottom line of it all is we want the best educated workforce in the world. We want to make it easier for people to get that education, and we don't want to saddle them with debt that they're going to have to be paying off for decades. That's the bottom line. Now, I want to take a moment. As you know, I'm running against Secretary Clinton, and I want to contrast our positions on some important issues so the people of Wisconsin can make an intelligent choice. Right now, as I mentioned a moment ago, how you raise money is extremely important. When we began our campaign, we had to make a very difficult decision. Do we do what every other candidate does and go out and establish a super PAC and raise money from Wall Street and the wealthiest people in this country? And we thought about it for about 1/10 of a second, and we concluded, no, we do not represent the billionaire class. We don't want their money. And we chose to do it a different way, in an unprecedented way. What we did is simply ask working families that if they wanted to support a campaign which is going to stand up to the wealthy and the powerful and create a stronger middle class, we would ask for their help. And what happened amazingly is over the last 11 months, we have received 6 million campaign individual contributions. That is a greater number of individual campaign contributions than any candidate in American history. Anybody here know the average contribution? $27. And that in itself is revolutionary because it shows that we can run a winning national campaign without having to be dependent on big money interests. Now, Secretary Clinton has chosen another direction. She has several super PACs. Her largest super PAC reported last month that they raised $25 million from special interests, including $15 million from Wall Street. In addition, Secretary Clinton has given speeches on Wall Street for $225,000 a speech. Now, what I think is if you're going to get $225,000 a speech, it's got to be an extraordinary, brilliant speech. It's got to be a speech that can transform this world. It's got to be a speech written in Shakespearean prose. And that is why I believe that Secretary Clinton should release the transcripts so the whole world can see that speech. But this issue of where you get your money is extremely important because it means who you are beholden to. I am proud to be beholden to people who send me a check for $27. And I am proud not to be beholden to Wall Street or the drug companies or the fossil fuel industry. Now, there is another issue which is important to the country and particularly important to the state of Wisconsin, and that is our trade policy. Now, I know trade is not a sexy issue. It's not something the media deals with at all. But it's a very important issue, and I think you all understand that. Over the last 30, 40 years, we have had trade policies in this country written by corporate America. And what they have been designed to do is to allow companies to shut down plants in Vermont, in Wisconsin, and all over this country because they don't want to pay workers here $15, $20, $25 an hour. They don't want to pay them a living wage. They don't want to protect environmental rules. They don't want to deal with unions. They'd rather move to Mexico or China, pay people pennies an hour. And that is what's happened in Wisconsin, happened in Vermont, and it is happening all across this country. In fact, since 2001, we have lost some 60,000 factories in America. Not all of it due to trade, but a lot of it. And millions of decent paying jobs. So when you ask why the middle class is disappearing, one of the reasons is a disastrous trade policy that has cost us millions of jobs and forced wages down in America. Let me just give you a few examples of trade policy's impact on the state of Wisconsin. In 2008, General Motors shut down its manufacturing plant in Janesville, destroying thousands of decent-paying jobs, and moved to Mexico, where workers there are paid a fraction of the wages that are paid here. In 1996, Johnson Controls shut down its Bruce City valve plant in Milwaukee and moved to Mexico, where they pay workers 72 cents an hour. Last year, Johnson Controls threw another 277 workers in Milwaukee out on the streets and moved to Mexico, China, and Slovakia. 15 years ago, Briggs & Stratton was Wisconsin's largest private employer with 11,000 manufacturing workers. Today, it only has 2,500 workers in Wisconsin after it moved plants to Mexico and China. Master Lock and Tower Automotive now employs more workers in Mexico than in Wisconsin. And Rockwell Automation has slashed its union workforce in Milwaukee from 6,000 down to 300 as it moved plants to Mexico, China, and the Dominican Republic. And on it goes. We're talking over a period of years of the loss of tens of thousands of good paying jobs here in Wisconsin, millions of jobs throughout this country. On all of these trade policies, NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, I not only voted against them, I helped lead the opposition against them. On the other hand, over the years, Secretary Clinton has supported virtually all of these disastrous trade agreements. That's right, that was the one. Now, there's another issue that's out there, which is also enormously important, and that is, foreign policy and military policy is one of the very important jobs that a president does. The most important foreign policy debate to be held in the modern history of this country was whether or not Congress believed what George W. Bush was saying about Iraq. I listened very carefully when I was in the House in 2002 to what Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld and all those guys were saying. I did not believe them. I voted against the war in Iraq. And in fact, if you go to my website, listen to what I said in 2002, and I kind of predicted much of what I thought could happen. Secretary Clinton was then in the Senate. She heard the same evidence. She voted for the war in Iraq, the worst foreign policy blunder in the modern history of America. Furthermore, when we talk about war and peace, let me be very clear. I will do everything that I can to make sure that, number one, we destroy ISIS, but we do it in a way that doesn't get our men and women in the military bogged down in a never-ending, perpetual war in the Middle East. One of the looming crises that faces this country, you're going to see and hear more and more about it, is the need for clean water in America. And that is why I am supporting the need to move toward the elimination of fracking in this country. Again, one of the differences that the Secretary and I have is that she supports fracking. Everybody here knows, or should know, that the way that real change takes place in this country is never from the top on down, it is always from the bottom on up. It is when people stand up and fight back. Right now, we need a massive effort to have the United States government lead the world in combating climate change. Let me be as clear as I can be as a member of the Senate Committee on the Environment. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already causing devastating problems in this country and around the world. And if we do not get our act together in the very near future by transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel, what we're going to be looking at by the end of the century is a planet 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, more drought, more flood, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, more international conflict as people fight over limited natural resources. That is not the kind of world that we should leave to future generations. So together, what we have got to do is to tell the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. And there is another issue that I feel very passionately about, and that is that the United States remains the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. My view as a human being, whether you are poor, middle class, or rich, you are entitled to health care because you are a person. The Affordable Care Act has done some good things, but we need to go further. Today, 29 million Americans have no health insurance. Many others are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments, and we are ripped off every day by the greed of the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for medicine. If elected president, I will do my best to move this country toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. And let me also add that right now, in Wisconsin, around this country, you got Republicans giving big speeches about family values. Everybody here know what Republicans mean by family values. What they mean is no woman in this room, in this state, in this country should have the right to control her own body. I disagree. And what Republicans mean by family values is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to marry. I disagree. Now, everybody here knows a very important political principle, and that throughout our history and the history of the world, change has never taken place, real change, not superficial change. Real change has never taken place from the top on down. It has always taken place from the bottom on up. What that means is that throughout history, no matter what the issue is, millions of people look around them and they say, you know what? The status quo is not acceptable. We need change, and we're going to do something about it. If you think about the trade union movement and workers, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, workers had no power at all. They could be forced to work 7 days a week. Their wages could be arbitrarily determined. They could be fired for any reason at all. And workers by the millions said, you know what? We are human beings. We're not animals. We're going to form unions. We're going to collectively negotiate a contract. That's how change came about. And if you look at the civil rights movement, going way back to names of people we don't even know, people who were killed, who were beaten, who were jailed, blacks and their white allies who said, you know what, in America, we will not tolerate segregation, racism, bigotry, and we're going to fight to end that. And I want everybody to remember what is often forgotten. 100 years ago, which is no time at all from an historical perspective, women in America did not have the right to vote, could not go to the schools they wanted to go to, could not do the work they wanted to do. 100 years ago. But women and their male allies stood up, fought back. Women went on hunger strikes. They went to jail. Some of them died to say that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. That's how change comes about. I want you to think about this. Think about change. 10 years ago, which is no time at all from an historical perspective, we were sitting in this room, somebody jumps up and says, you know, Bernie, I think that by the year 2015, gay marriage will be legal in 50 states in this country. The person next to him or her would have said, you are nuts, can't happen. But what happened is that for decades, because of the struggle of the gay community, the LGBT community, and their straight allies, we reached the moment when the American people understood that people have a right to love each other regardless of their gender. That didn't happen from the top on down. Didn't happen because a very, very conservative Supreme Court decided that that was the right thing to do. It happened because millions of people demanded that it happen. And let me give you an even more contemporary example. If we were here 5 or 6 years ago, and somebody jumps up and they say, you know, Bernie, this $7.25 an hour minimum wage, that is a terrible starvation wage. We've got to raise it to $15 an hour. The person next to her would have said, $15 an hour? You want to double the minimum wage? You're crazy. We can't do it. It's impossible. You're too radical. You're thinking too big. 5 years later, Seattle, $15 an hour. San Francisco, Los Angeles, $15 an hour. Oregon, $15 an hour. California, $15 an hour. And if I have anything to say about it, the United States of America, $15 an hour. Now, what's my point? Here is the point. You do not have to accept the status quo as part of long-term reality. You are human beings living in a democratic society. If you want to change the status quo, you can change the status quo. All over this country today, people are looking around and they're saying, this is crazy. Why do we have so much income and wealth inequality? Unacceptable. Why do we have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make a living? Unacceptable. Why do we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Unacceptable. Why are veterans of this country sleeping out on the street? Unacceptable. Why are elderly people unable to afford the medicine they need? Unacceptable. Why are young people graduating deeply in debt? Unacceptable. Why are we the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid family and medical leave? Why aren't we guaranteeing health care to all people as every other country does? Every other major country. And people are beginning to say, wait a second, this status quo may be working for the top 1%, but it's not working for the bottom 99%. We have got to change that. And that is what this campaign is about. It is an understanding that I can't do it alone, really can't. Wish I could tell you, hey, just trust me, I'm going to do it all. Can't do it. Powers that be are too powerful. We need a movement. We need you to become involved in the political process in a way that we have not seen people become involved for a very long time. Next Tuesday, there will be a primary election. It is an extremely important primary election. I hope that we break Wisconsin turnout history. I hope you come out. Thank you all very much.